Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. If you're exhausted from explaining your life, this might be the moment you realize who you've been living it for. You've probably noticed it before, the weight that settles on your chest after trying to explain your choices, your feelings, or your life to someone who just doesn't seem to get it. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes from talking not to be heard, but to be validated, to be approved, to be made safe in someone else's eyes. You feel like you're shrinking, bending, twisting your words to fit a shape that isn't yours, hoping they'll nod, hoping they'll finally understand, hoping that the gap between who you are and who they want you to be will disappear. And yet, no matter how many explanations you offer, the fatigue never goes away. Instead, it lingers, reminding you that this effort isn't about them. It's about how desperately you've been trying to hold your own worth in the hands of people who were never meant to carry it. It's not easy to face the truth. Not everyone is meant to understand you. Not everyone is equipped to witness your growth, your struggles, or the quiet victories you fight for each day. And yet we spend so much of our energy trying to make them see, trying to make them care, trying to prove that our lives are worthy, that our choices are right. We wonder if we're too much or too little, if our dreams are unreasonable, if our hearts are too fragile, if our stories are too complicated. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, this habit of justification begins to erode us. The more we bend, the less we recognize ourselves. The more we explain, the less confident we feel. Awareness begins when you start noticing that fatigue, that subtle tightening in your chest, the quiet voice that whispers, "Why am I trying so hard to make them understand?" It begins when you recognize that some people don't need to understand you, and that's okay. The truth is, your life doesn't need an audience to be valid. Your choices don't need approval to be right. And the more time you spend seeking validation from those who can't give it, the more you distance yourself from the clarity and peace that comes from knowing your own truth. You don't have to justify every decision, every feeling, every chapter of your life. Sometimes the most courageous act is to simply stop speaking for the sake of someone else's comfort. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to rest in the understanding that you are enough without explanation, that your presence is meaningful even if it isn't fully seen, and that your life in all its beauty and complexity is yours to live, not theirs to judge. Notice when you feel drained, when the urge to explain arises again. Pause. Ask yourself, do they really need this explanation? Or am I trying to convince myself of my worth through their eyes? And in that pause, you find a small freedom. The freedom to reclaim your energy, your voice, and your truth. The freedom to live without justifying, to breathe without bending, to exist without apology. Have you ever noticed how deeply the need for approval can take root in your life, often in ways so subtle that you don't even realize it until exhaustion has set in? It begins almost invisibly. A comment here, a critique there, a fleeting look of doubt or disapproval, and suddenly you're off balance. You find yourself twisting your words, softening your truths, editing your feelings, all in an effort to make others comfortable. There's a strange tension between who you know you are and who you feel you must be to be accepted. And when that tension lingers day after day, it begins to shape not only the way you speak, but the way you breathe, the way you move, the way you show up in your own life. The desire for approval is not inherently wrong. It is human. We are wired for connection, and we seek reassurance because, at our core, we want to matter, to be loved, to be seen. But the problem arises when that desire becomes a demand, when your sense of worth is no longer anchored in your own understanding of yourself, but is constantly measured against the opinions of others. And once that happens, every interaction, every conversation becomes a test, a subtle examination of whether you are enough, whether your choices are justified, whether your feelings are valid. You start to live in a perpetual state of explanation, as if your very existence needs validation. Over-explaining often masquerades as clarity. You tell yourself you are simply providing context, helping others understand your decisions, making sure they see your perspective, but underneath that rationalization is something far more vulnerable and intimate: fear. Fear that if you do not explain, you will be rejected. Fear that if you do not justify, you will lose connection. Fear that your life in all its complexity might not be worthy of acceptance unless it is carefully translated into words that someone else can digest, approve, or nod along to. And when fear is at the center of your explanations, every word carries a weight far heavier than its meaning. Each sentence becomes an attempt to prevent the distance you dread, an attempt to negotiate your value through someone else's perception. It is exhausting, isn't it? The mental gymnastics required to craft your story so that it lands just right, the constant assessment of whether your feelings are reasonable, the endless self-questioning. Did I say too much? Did I not say enough? Was I too emotional, too confident, too bold, too meek? Over time, the mind grows weary and the heart grows tired. You might start to notice the subtle erosion of your sense of self. You begin to wonder whether your feelings are valid, whether your choices are justified, whether your presence in this world is acceptable as it is, without constant explanation. It's a quiet, creeping kind of exhaustion that no one sees, but it affects everything. Your work, your relationships, your ability to rest, your capacity to trust your own judgment. Vulnerability is at the heart of the struggle. You are vulnerable not just because you care about what others think, but because you are showing up fully alive, fully human, in a world that doesn't always reward authenticity. Every time you explain yourself, there is a silent question hanging in the air. Will they accept this version of me, or will they reject it? And when the answer seems uncertain, the natural response is to keep explaining, to keep softening, to keep shrinking in order to make someone else comfortable. Vulnerability, when it is manipulated by fear of rejection, becomes a cage. And yet, the more you recognize it, the more power you have to free yourself. What if, for a moment, you could see over-explaining not as a flaw, but as a signal, a guidepost? What if you could recognize it as a sign that you have been giving your energy to the wrong places, that your attention and your validation have been spent where they were never meant to be received? The need to explain yourself constantly is a clue, a quiet but profound whisper from your soul that something is out of alignment. That whisper says, your worth does not depend on their understanding. Your value is not determined by their approval. Your peace is not negotiable. The challenge is that it takes courage to hear that whisper, because it means confronting the discomfort of letting go, of trusting yourself when others cannot, of standing in the quiet space between fear and freedom. There is a deep paradox here. The very act of seeking approval often masks an intense fear of being alone. Yet the path to liberation lies in standing alone in your own truth. When you stop seeking validation from those who cannot offer it, you begin to reclaim something priceless, your own authority over your life, your own permission to exist as you are without justification. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent. It does not mean you stop caring or stop connecting. It means you learn to care in a way that nourishes you rather than depletes you. It means choosing relationships, conversations, and spaces where your words are received with respect and your presence is celebrated rather than constantly evaluated. It is uncomfortable at first. The desire for approval has been trained into you over years, even decades, through subtle social cues, cultural expectations, family dynamics, and personal experiences of rejection. It has become a reflex, a way of keeping yourself safe. And safety is seductive, even when it comes at the cost of authenticity. You may feel a wave of guilt when you stop explaining yourself, as if silence is a betrayal, as if withdrawing your explanations is somehow selfish. But in truth, it is an act of profound self-respect. You are choosing to protect your energy, to honor your story, to recognize that your life does not need constant justification to be meaningful. Practical steps toward breaking this habit begin with awareness and reflection. Notice the moments when you feel the urge to explain. What is driving that urge? Is it fear, insecurity, or the hope for approval? Once you identify the underlying motivation, pause and give yourself permission to respond differently. Instead of crafting another explanation, try a simple statement or a quiet pause. You might say, I hear you, I see your perspective, I don't need to explain myself further. That small act, repeated over time, gradually rewires the brain and the heart. It signals to yourself that your worth is internal, not external, that your presence is enough, even if others don't fully understand. Another vital step is to practice self-validation. Before seeking acknowledgement from others, affirm yourself internally. Recognize your choices, honor your feelings, and affirm your boundaries. This is not arrogance. It is emotional literacy. It is the recognition that you have the right to live fully in your own truth without having to negotiate every aspect of your life for acceptance. Self-validation does not remove the need for connection, but it ensures that connection is sought from a place of abundance, not desperation. It is also important to cultivate discernment about where your explanations are truly necessary. Not every comment, every question, or every raised eyebrow demands an answer. Some spaces are not meant for your full story. Some people are not equipped to hear it. Learning to recognize these moments is a form of wisdom and protection. It allows you to conserve your energy for the people and places that actually matter, where your authenticity is embraced rather than scrutinized. Over time, you begin to notice a shift. Your conversations become lighter, your energy more sustainable, your sense of self more intact. You no longer expend yourself in the futile pursuit of universal understanding. The path away from over-explaining is deeply liberating, but it is not linear. There will be moments of doubt, moments where old reflexes resurface and you feel compelled to justify yourself. That is natural. Each time it happens, it is an opportunity to return to awareness, to reflect, to choose differently. You are learning a new way of being, one where your internal compass guides your words and actions rather than the fluctuating opinions of others. With each choice to pause, with each refusal to over-explain, you strengthen the connection with your own truth and weaken the grip of approval seeking over your life. Imagine what it would feel like to live without that constant need to explain. Imagine breathing without the weight of someone else's judgment pressing down on you. Imagine making decisions, taking actions, and living fully guided by your own wisdom and values, not by the imagined expectations of others. That vision is not a fantasy, it is a possibility that begins with small, courageous steps. Awareness is the first. Recognition of your fear is next. Choosing silence, practicing. Self-validation and cultivating discernment follow. Each step builds on the last, creating a foundation for a life lived with integrity, freedom, and dignity. Ultimately, the journey is about reclaiming your power, not asserting it over others. It is about recognizing that your life is yours to live, your choice is yours to make, your feelings yours to feel. When you stop over-explaining, you send a quiet but profound message to yourself: I am enough. I do not need permission to exist. My story is mine, and I will honor it. And in honoring it, you create the conditions for deeper, more authentic connections, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine understanding and mutual respect. This is the essence of emotional courage, the willingness to show up fully, not for validation, not for acceptance, but for the simple, undeniable truth that your life is meaningful because it is lived honestly. The people who matter, the people who belong in your journey, will see and appreciate you for the unfiltered, unapologetic version of yourself. And those who cannot will gradually fall away, leaving space for authenticity, peace, and freedom to flourish. So when you feel that old compulsion rising, the need to justify, explain, or defend yourself, take a deep breath. Feel the tension in your body, name the fear, and choose differently. Recognize the courage it takes to stand in your truth, affirm your own worth, protect your energy, and remember the path to self-respect is not found in constant explanation, but in quiet confidence, in deliberate choice, and in the unwavering acknowledgement that you are enough exactly as you are. Courage is not something that suddenly appears in grand, shining moments. It is quiet. It grows in the spaces where fear lives, in the moments when the heart beats fast because standing in your own truth feels risky. Courage often comes in whispers, in small acts that seem insignificant at first, yet each one carries the power to transform the way you live. It begins the moment you choose to let discomfort exist rather than escape it. When you decide to show up fully, even though there is no guarantee of acceptance or understanding. Courage is what allows you to stand firm in your own life, even when everyone else seems to demand an explanation or a compromise. There is a subtle but relentless fear that underlies the need to justify ourselves. We are conditioned to believe that people's comfort depends on our performance, that if we don't explain, soften, or adjust, we risk rejection. And so we shrink, we bend, we dilute our words and our presence. But courage is the refusal to let fear dictate the terms of your existence. It is the realization that discomfort is not a signal of failure, but a signal of growth. The trembling in your chest, a knot in your stomach, the hesitant pause before speaking, all of these are evidence that you are stepping out of the familiar, that you are choosing a new way of being that prioritizes your own integrity over external approval. Choosing courage does not mean you will not feel anxiety or fear. In fact, it often intensifies those emotions at first. The heart races, the mind debates, the old reflex to justify rises like a tide, threatening to sweep you off course. But courage asks you to breathe anyway, to speak anyway, to act anyway. It asks you to tolerate the temporary discomfort of being misunderstood, to accept the possibility that some will reject you, and to do so without shrinking. Each time you choose courage over explanation, you reinforce a fundamental truth. Your life, your choices, your presence do not require validation to be meaningful. Courage is not about winning approval. It is about winning freedom from the chains of fear. Many people confuse courage with confrontation or bravado, but real courage is far subtler. It is a quiet, steady presence that refuses to negotiate with fear. It is the calm voice inside that says, I will stand in my truth, even if others cannot receive it. Courage is what allows you to set boundaries, to walk away from conversations that drain you, to release the compulsion to justify your choices. It is what gives you the strength to embrace silence in the face of judgment, knowing that explanation is not always necessary and that your worth does not depend on it. This kind of courage is rarely recognized by others because it is internal, invisible, and deeply personal, but it is transformative nonetheless. Fear and courage often coexist. You will feel fear, and that is not weakness. It is evidence that you are moving into new territory. Courage does not eliminate fear. It allows you to act despite it. Acting courageously in small moments, saying no when you feel obligated to say yes, speaking up for yourself when it would be easier to stay silent, choosing peace over conflict even when it feels uncomfortable, creates a ripple effect. With each act, you weaken the hold of fear and strengthen your trust in yourself. You begin to realize that discomfort is temporary, but the dignity gained from standing in your truth lasts. The challenge of courage lies in its demand for authenticity. It requires you to confront the habits you have developed to keep yourself safe. The explanations, the justifications, the endless attempts to anticipate and control how others will perceive you. Courage asks you to step out of those habits and into a more honest, vulnerable form of existence. And vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of connection, growth, and self-respect. When you have the courage to be vulnerable, to show up as you truly are, you create space for others to do the same, but more importantly, you create space for yourself to live without apology. Courage is also deeply tied to boundaries. When you act courageously, you protect your energy. You recognize the difference between people who are capable of holding your truth and those who are not. You allow yourself to speak your mind without fear of constant judgment. You refuse to shrink to make others comfortable. You learn to walk away from situations that demand you compromise your values, and you discover that your absence does not diminish your significance. Courage, in this sense, is a form of liberation. It is the daily practice of choosing self-respect over approval, of valuing your peace above everyone else's comfort. It is important to remember that courage grows with practice. At first, it may feel awkward, even frightening. You may stumble, you may feel exposed, you may worry that you are being selfish or unreasonable. That is natural. The heart has to stretch into new territory, and the muscles of bravery are built slowly over time. Each moment you choose courage, you lay down another stone on the path toward living fully, authentically, and unapologetically, and gradually you discover a new rhythm to life. One where your actions are guided not by fear of judgment, but by clarity, by integrity, by the quiet, unwavering knowledge that your life is yours to live as you see fit. Consider the transformative power of this choice. When you no longer feel compelled to justify yourself at every turn, your energy shifts. Conversations become lighter. Relationships deepen because they are rooted in mutual respect rather than obligation. You begin to trust your intuition, your decisions, and your ability to navigate life without constant reassurance. Courage allows you to act in alignment with your values, even when the world seems resistant, even when the path forward is uncertain. It gives you a sense of agency that no amount of approval could ever provide. The journey of courage is not solitary, but it is deeply personal. No one else can walk it for you. You must choose repeatedly to act in alignment with your truth. You must choose over and over to tolerate discomfort, to embrace vulnerability, and to refuse to shrink for the comfort of others. You will discover that with each act, the compulsion to explain diminishes. The fear of judgment loosens its grip. You find yourself standing taller, thinking more clearly, and breathing more freely. Courage is the bridge between the person you have been, one who seeks constant approval, and the person you're becoming, one who lives with integrity, dignity, and self-respect. Imagine the freedom that comes when you no longer feel the need to justify every word, every decision, every feeling. Imagine living in a space where your inner voice is stronger than the critiques of the world around you. Imagine walking into any room, any conversation, any moment with the quiet knowledge that you are enough, not because anyone else says so, but because you have chosen courage over fear. That is the gift of courage. It is not loud or flashy. It does not demand recognition. It simply allows you to live in alignment with your own truth, to act with integrity, and to honor your life without apology. Courage also brings clarity. When you act courageously, you begin to recognize what is worth your energy and what is not. You see who belongs in your life, who is capable of holding your truth, and who is not. You stop over-explaining, stop negotiating your peace, and stop seeking approval from those who cannot offer it. Each act of courage reinforces a simple but powerful message. Your worth is internal, your decisions are valid, and your life is meaningful without needing constant validation from others. Courage creates the conditions for authentic connection, self-respect, and a deep sense of freedom that is impossible to achieve when living in fear of judgment. Every time you choose courage, you also create a model for others by standing in your own truth, by refusing to compromise your integrity for the comfort of others. You inspire those around you to do the same, not through words, but through presence. Courage is contagious in its own quiet way. The simple act of living authentically, of choosing discomfort over compromise, of honoring your own boundaries, sends a signal to the world. It is possible to exist fully without apology. It is possible to navigate life without bending endlessly to the expectations of others. And this ripple effect extends beyond yourself, creating spaces where authenticity is honored, where respect is mutual, and where peace is cultivated. Ultimately, courage is a practice, a daily choice, and a commitment to yourself. It asks for honesty, integrity, and resilience. It asks you to face the fear that comes with stepping out of the familiar and into the uncertain. It asks you to prioritize your own worth, to trust your inner voice, and to act in alignment with your values regardless of external pressures. Courage allows you to experience life more fully, to make decisions that honor your soul, and to live with a sense of freedom that comes from self-trust rather than approval seeking. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes, until standing in your own truth feels not only possible, but necessary for your survival and your peace. So when the next moment comes, when the impulse to over-explain rises, when fear whispers that you must justify yourself to be loved or accepted, pause, breathe, feel the tension, the nervousness, the fear, and then choose differently. Speak if you must, but speak from courage, not from obligation. Stand if you must, but stand for yourself, not for anyone else's comfort. And know this, every act of courage, no matter how small, reinforces the truth that your life, your choices, and your presence are valid simply because you are alive, simply because you are willing to stand in your truth, and simply because you have chosen courage over fear. Change is never easy. It asks you to step away from the familiar, to let go of patterns that once brought a sense of safety, and to move into a space that feels uncertain and raw. Even when you know deep inside that something needs to shift, the thought of rewriting the story you've been living, of redefining who you are, what you allow, and how you respond can be terrifying. There is comfort in the routines, in the scripts you've followed for years, even if those scripts no longer serve you. Change requires leaving behind the old sense of security, the known reactions, and the familiar expectations of others, and stepping into a reality that is untested and unproven. And yet, it is only in that discomfort that growth, freedom, and true transformation are possible. Many people resist change because it is inherently messy. It challenges the parts of us that crave approval, that fear judgment, that long for predictability. It forces us to confront our own complicity in patterns we no longer wish to maintain. There's a subtle voice inside that whispers, perhaps you should stay where you are. Perhaps this is too much, too risky, too uncertain. That voice is fear speaking, and it can feel persuasive, almost logical. But the deeper truth is that the longer you remain in a story that does not reflect your values or your truth, the more you distance yourself from the life you were meant to live. Change asks you to prioritize your own alignment over comfort, your own freedom over the familiarity of repetition. Rewriting your story requires an honest examination of the narratives you have carried for years. You must look closely at the beliefs you've internalized, the expectations you've tried to meet, and the justifications you've clung to in order to feel safe. You may realize that many of the reasons you have stayed in certain situations, maintained certain relationships, or continued certain behaviors are rooted in fear rather than desire. The recognition can be painful. It can stir guilt, shame, or self-doubt. Yet within that pain lies the opportunity for clarity. It is a signal that you are on the threshold of transformation, that your life is asking you to step into a new chapter, one that aligns with your truth rather than the comfort or approval of others. Change also requires courage because it is not enough to simply recognize that something must shift. You must act. You must make choices that feel uncomfortable, that may disrupt the expectations of those around you, that may even challenge the version of yourself you thought you knew. Every step into change is a small act of bravery. It is the willingness to say no when the old pattern demanded yes, to set boundaries where you previously compromised, and to trust yourself in the face of uncertainty. It is choosing growth over stagnation, authenticity over pretense, and freedom over fear. One of the most difficult aspects of change is learning to let go of the past, not just events, but the identity you have built around them. We often cling to old narratives because they are familiar, even when they no longer serve us. Perhaps you've defined yourself by mistakes you made, by roles you felt obligated to fill, by the expectations of others that shaped your decisions. Rewriting your story means acknowledging those chapters, understanding their lessons, and then consciously deciding that they no longer dictate who you will be moving forward. It is a process of shedding the weight of obligation and stepping into a version of yourself that is liberated, intentional, and self-respecting. The journey of change is not linear. There will be moments when doubt resurfaces, when old habits tempt you back into comfort, when the fear of judgment or rejection threatens to pull you off course. Those moments are part of the process, not failures. They are reminders that transformation is a practice, not a single act. Each time you recommit to your path, each time you make a choice that honors your truth, you strengthen your resilience and deepen your self-trust. Change is a series of decisions repeated over time that cumulatively reshape your life, your relationships, and your sense of self. Part of embracing change is also embracing accountability to yourself and to the vision you hold for your life. It is easy to blame circumstances, other people, or past mistakes for where you are. But true change begins when you take responsibility for your own narrative, when you recognize that while you cannot control everything, you can control how you respond, how you show up, and the choices you make moving forward. This is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about conscious living, about actively choosing how your story unfolds rather than letting it be dictated by habit, fear, or the expectations of others. Another essential element of change is patience. Transformation does not happen overnight. Rewriting your story takes time, reflection, and consistent effort. It requires you to be gentle with yourself while also holding firm to the vision of the life you want to create. There will be setbacks, moments of frustration, and times when the old narrative seems more comfortable. But each setback is an opportunity to learn, to refine, and to recommit to the person you are becoming. Change is iterative. It is a gradual unfolding, a careful weaving of insight, courage, and action into a new tapestry of selfhood. Change also demands a willingness to embrace uncertainty. The unknown is often frightening because it strips away the familiar reference points we rely on to feel safe. Yet within uncertainty lies possibility. When you step into the unknown, you open yourself to experiences, relationships, and opportunities that were previously inaccessible. You allow life to surprise you in ways that can be profoundly liberating. Change asks you to trust that even without certainty, you possess the inner resources to navigate, adapt, and thrive. It asks you to believe that your truth, your integrity, and your resilience are sufficient, even when the path forward is unclear. A critical aspect of rewriting your story is recognizing that not everyone will understand or accept your choices. Some people may resist, criticize, or question your decisions. That is part of the process. It is impossible to live fully aligned with your values without encountering some resistance. But the more you embrace change, the more you discover that their approval is not required. Your life does not need validation to be meaningful. Your choices do not need justification to be right. The courage to change comes from the understanding that living authentically will always feel uncomfortable to some, and that is acceptable because your responsibility is to yourself, not to their comfort. Change also deepens your sense of freedom. When you rewrite your story, you no longer carry the burden of explaining, defending, or shrinking yourself to meet others' expectations. You reclaim the space to make decisions that align with your values, your dreams, and your peace. You begin to notice a sense of clarity and calm that was previously clouded by doubt and obligation. Life becomes less about negotiating for approval and more about cultivating integrity. Each decision, each action, and each boundary becomes an expression of your authenticity, a tangible manifestation of the new story you are writing for yourself. Ultimately, change is about self-respect. It is about recognizing that your life is precious, your time is finite, and your energy deserves to be protected. It is about honoring the wisdom you have gained, the lessons you have learned, and the person you are becoming. Rewriting your story is not an act of rebellion against the past. It is an act of affirmation for your present and your future. It is a declaration that you will no longer live for the comfort of others, that you will no longer compromise your peace, and that you will no longer allow fear or expectation to dictate the terms of your life. The process of change is also deeply transformative on an emotional level. As you release old patterns and embrace new ways of being, you begin to experience a freedom that extends beyond practical decisions. You cultivate a sense of inner authority, a calm confidence that does not depend on external validation. You develop resilience, knowing that discomfort is temporary and clarity is lasting. You nurture self-compassion, realizing that mistakes, setbacks, and fears are part of growth, not evidence of inadequacy. Change transforms not just the circumstances of your life, but the way you inhabit your own being, the way you relate to yourself, and the way you interact with the world. To embrace change fully is to accept both the beauty and the difficulty of transformation. It is to acknowledge that letting go of the old, familiar story may bring fear, doubt, or loneliness. Yet it is precisely in these moments that the seeds of growth and freedom are planted. Each step, each decision, each act of alignment with your truth contributes to a life that feels more expansive, more intentional, and more authentically yours. You discover that the story you once told out of obligation, fear, or habit can be rewritten into a narrative of strength, clarity, and peace. Change is not a one-time event, it is a lifelong practice. Each day offers an opportunity to examine your patterns, make choices that reflect your values, and release the parts of your story that no longer serve you. Each day is a chance to act with courage, to honor your truth, and to embrace the uncertainty that accompanies authentic living. And with each act of alignment, you step further into the person you were always meant to become, a person who lives deliberately, courageously, and without apology. So when the next moment of hesitation comes, when fear tempts you to retreat, when the old scripts rise, when the familiar feels safer, pause. Remember that change is not about perfection or immediate transformation. It is about choosing repeatedly to align with your truth, to release what no longer serves you, and to embrace the uncertainty of growth. Trust that each step you take, each boundary you set, each act of courage in the face of fear brings you closer to the life you were always meant to live. Change is hard, but it is also liberating. It is messy, but it is honest. And above all, it is the path to living fully, intentionally, and authentically. Growth is the quiet reward that follows awareness, courage, and change. It is not flashy or immediate. It does not announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic transformations. Growth is subtle, often measured in shifts that only become visible over time. Moments when you no longer feel the compulsion to explain yourself. Moments when silence feels freeing instead of awkward. Moments when your energy feels lighter because you no longer carry the weight of other people's expectations. Growth is the result of showing up fully in your life, of choosing authenticity over approval, of stepping repeatedly into discomfort and discovering again and again that you are capable, resilient, and enough exactly as you are. Growth begins with presence. It begins with noticing the patterns that once dictated your life, the compulsive need to justify your choices, the invisible chains of approval seeking, the invisible scripts you follow to make others comfortable. Once you see these patterns clearly, you start to recognize the cost they have exacted. The exhaustion, the self-doubt, the quiet erosion of confidence, all of it becomes visible, undeniable. And in that recognition lies the seed of transformation, because awareness without action is merely observation. Growth demands that you take what you have seen and do something with it, even if it feels uncomfortable or uncertain. There is a profound inner struggle that accompanies growth. It is the tension between the person you were conditioned to be and the person you are learning to become. Old habits, old fears, and old doubts do not simply vanish overnight. They linger, whispering familiar comforts and tempting you to revert to the safety of approval. You may feel guilt when you prioritize your own peace, anxiety when you enforce boundaries, or loneliness when others do not understand your choices. These are not signs of failure. They are evidence of growth. They are the echoes of the old self that resist transformation, and they are natural companions on the journey toward self-respect, freedom, and authenticity. True growth requires patience, gentleness, and persistence. It is not a race, nor is it a linear path. There will be days when you feel steady, confident, and aligned, and there will be days when the old patterns creep back in, when the need to explain, justify, or shrink feels irresistible. In those moments, growth asks you to return to yourself, not with judgment or frustration, but with curiosity and compassion. Each choice to stand firm, each refusal to bend unnecessarily, each act of self-respect is a step forward, even if the progress feels imperceptible. Over time, these small, repeated acts accumulate into profound transformation. Growth also brings clarity about who and what deserves your energy. As you evolve, you begin to notice that not every relationship, conversation, or expectation is worth your time. You develop a heightened sense of discernment, a quiet understanding of what aligns with your values and what does not. This clarity is liberating. It allows you to invest your energy where it matters, to cultivate connections that are mutual and nourishing, and to release attachments that are draining, judgmental, or misaligned with your truth. In this way, growth is not just an internal process. It reshapes your external world as well. Another dimension of growth is resilience. Each time you choose authenticity over comfort, each time you step into courage rather than fear, you strengthen your capacity to endure challenges without losing your center. You learn that your sense of self is not dependent on approval, that your worth is not negotiable, and that your peace is not contingent on the reactions of others. Growth equips you with the tools to navigate life with steadiness, to act decisively without second guessing, and to remain anchored even when the world around you feels chaotic or judgmental. Resilience is both the consequence and the companion of growth. It allows you to continue evolving no matter the obstacles. Growth also deepens self-compassion. As you step away from the need to justify your life, you begin to treat yourself with the care and kindness that you once reserved for others. You recognize that mistakes, setbacks, and failures are part of the journey, not evidence of inadequacy. You forgive yourself for the times you bent too far, explained too much, or sought approval in ways that drained you. And in that forgiveness, you create a foundation for further growth, a space where curiosity, courage, and authenticity can flourish without the weight of past self-judgment. The beauty of growth lies in its alignment with freedom. As you release the compulsion to please, explain, or defend, you discover a profound liberation. You are free to live according to your values, to pursue your dreams, to speak your truth, and to hold your boundaries without guilt or fear. Your life becomes a reflection of your integrity rather than a negotiation with others' expectations. In this freedom, you find a sense of wholeness that cannot be taken away because it is built on the foundation of your own choices, your own courage, and your own self-respect. Growth is also deeply connected to gratitude. As you evolve, you begin to notice the subtle gifts of this journey, the small victories of standing in your truth, the moments of clarity when fear no longer dictates your actions, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you are living in alignment with your own values. These moments accumulate, creating a sense of richness and fulfillment that external validation could never provide. You learn to celebrate the progress you make, however incremental, and to honor the resilience, courage, and self-awareness that have carried you to this point. Ultimately, growth is the act of fully embracing yourself without apology, without explanation, and without compromise. It is the willingness to live with integrity, to trust your intuition, and to navigate life with clarity and confidence. It is the recognition that your life is meaningful, not because others approve, but because you honor it with authenticity and courage. Growth transforms not just the way you live, but the way you experience life. It deepens your connections, strengthens your resilience, clarifies your purpose, and cultivates a profound sense of inner peace. When you stand fully in your growth, you realize that the journey was never about proving yourself to anyone else. It was about reclaiming your energy, your voice, and your life. It was about learning that you do not need to explain your choices, justify your feelings, or shrink to make others comfortable. It was about trusting yourself, honoring your own wisdom, and living in alignment with your values, even when it feels uncomfortable. Growth is the culmination of awareness, vulnerability, courage, and change, a space where your authenticity is not negotiable, your presence is honored, and your life is yours to live fully. And so, in the quiet moments when you reflect on all you have learned, you see that growth is not a destination, but a way of being. It is an ongoing practice of standing in your truth, making choices that align with your values, embracing discomfort as a teacher, and nurturing yourself with compassion and respect. Growth allows you to exist without apology, to act without fear, and to live without constantly seeking the approval of others. It is a gift you give yourself, a deep, enduring, transformative gift that shapes not only the life you lead, but the person you are becoming, moment by moment, choice by choice. Growth is the freedom to live your life authentically, fully, and unapologetically. It is the reward for courageously facing fear, embracing change, and honoring your own worth. And in that freedom, you finally experience the quiet, profound joy of knowing that your life is yours, exactly as it should be, and that you are enough just as you are.